This Friday night at 8 p.m. Eastern Time, not Saturday night, I want to reiterate that, Friday night, we have a Big Ten football matchup between the 1-9, 0-7, winless in Big Ten play Purdue Boilermakers and the 4-6, 2-5 in Big Ten play Michigan State Spartans. This game will be streamed on Fox. Michigan State opened up here as a pretty hefty favorite at 13.5 points. I saw about a day ago, maybe 2 days ago, that the line was trending down, but it's back up now, dead even with the opening spread at MSU minus 13.5. And Michigan State's given an 80.6% chance to win this game per ESPN's FPI in Spartan Stadium in the city of East Lansing. What's hilarious about this is that Michigan State is given better odds to beat Purdue than Penn State is to beat Minnesota, or Ohio State is given to beat Indiana. And Ohio State is viewed by power ratings, whether you agree or disagree with them, as way better than IU. And Penn State, similarly, although I think it's more obvious that Penn State's ahead of Minnesota, is viewed as miles better than Minnesota as well via power ratings. And yet, Michigan State, who's viewed as an average at best, bad team at worst, is a heavy favorite to beat Purdue, because Purdue, let me tell you, is terrible. And Michigan State should win this game, and they need, Jonathan Smith needs to win this game. So we're going to talk about that here on College Football with Sam, and I'm going to give you my preview and prediction. But before we do that, I ask you to help out the channel in 7 different ways. Really just 6. The 7th is optional, and they're all free outside of the 7th, and they don't take very much time. If you can, get into the end zone for the channel, score a touchdown for the channel by hitting that subscribe button, liking the video, hitting the notification bell, sharing this video and channel around, commenting your prediction down below, and joining our Discord server via the link in the description or down below in the pinned comment. We're trying to hit 30,000 subscribers. We did hit 20,000 subscribers, and we will be doing a giveaway at the end of the regular season to celebrate our accomplishment. Not just my accomplishment, but yours too, because you've helped us build the best Big Ten football channel on YouTube. We are trying to build the best college football channel on YouTube, and with only your help, we can do that. So subscribe, like the video, hit the notification bell so that you can get notified when we release new content. But by joining our Discord server, you will get notified when we release new content, and you will also get to talk to fellow fans, college football fans, both who are College Football with Sam fans, and maybe just some who want to talk football even if they don't watch the channel all that much. And you'll also get to talk with me about college football too. So please, via the link in the description or down below in the pinned comment, join our Discord server. And if you want to donate to the channel and support the work we do here monetarily, you can donate via Super Chat in the comments section. You can sign up as a paid member of our Patreon page or purchase merchandise like this white hoodie from my merchandise store. And the links to those are in the description or down below in the pinned comment. Same as with the Discord server. But simply put, this is a matchup where MSU should be a heavy favorite. And I know that Michigan State, they're coming off of that blowout loss to Illinois. Purdue is coming off of an even worse loss at home to Penn State, where Penn State just effortlessly put up 49 points on them. Purdue is viewed as 12.2 points worse than the average college football team per FPI. They're viewed as 14.8 points worse than the average college football team in S&P Plus, outside of the top 100 there. And according to the potential power ratings, or the potential power index that I have created, that for now only measures power 4 teams, hopefully soon measures the group of 5 too, Purdue is the worst power 4 team. It's by a mile too. The second worst team would be favored by my power ratings by about anywhere from a field goal to touchdown over Purdue. Purdue is viewed as 21.5 points worse than the average power 4 team. It's insane. It is unfathomable how bad they are. I have never seen a Michigan State team or a Michigan team or an Ohio State team or potentially even an Indiana team who is as bad as this Purdue team. I mean, you have to go back to the Chris Ash Rutgers teams to make a comparison to how bad this Purdue team is. Michigan State by no means is a great team, but they're only 2 points worse than the average team per FPI, 5.9 points worse than the average team per S&P Plus, and my potential power ratings, because of some players that Michigan State has And more importantly, the staff. I'm very high on the staff, and there is a staff input in my potential power index. Michigan State's viewed barely as 2.6 points better than the average college football team. May I mind you, they are 4-5. They do have issues, and I do think my power ratings actually have overrated Michigan State here. It's because my power ratings, I have my own personal ones that I make up in my head from what I see that's purely computed by my brain. The potential power index has an input from me, but it also has just objective inputs that are computerized, like statistics or grades of different players from multiple different sources. So I do think that PPI is overrating Michigan State a bit, but remember, they were competitive with OSU for about a quarter or a half, and it was really the turnovers, which are sort of random, that killed them. They could have beaten Boston College. They drummed Iowa, and Iowa is a good team analytically. They could have beaten Michigan. And against Illinois, that was a game until the fourth quarter. So this is a team that is not good by any means, and they have a lot to work on in the 2025 preseason, 2024 postseason, but they're way better than Purdue. And the points per play margin and the expected points added margin all shows that. Purdue, on a play-per-play basis, scores my apologies, 0.393 fewer points than their opponent does on an individual play-by-play basis. That's horrible. That means on an average basis, play per play, they get blown out. On a game-by-game basis, they get destroyed. Notre Dame beat them 66-7. Ohio State beat them 45-0. Penn State beat them 49-10. Northwestern on the road beat them, yes, in overtime, but still beat them. Oregon traveled on a Friday night after winning that game against Ohio State, so emotional win, traveled to Purdue. People were talking about, well, maybe they're hungover. Oh, Oregon was hungover. They looked horrible in that game. They won 35-0. And Illinois, even though Purdue put up 49 points in Illinois scored 50 points on Purdue. So this is a bad football team. This is bad is disrespectful to the bad teams. This is a terrible football team. And they have a negative 0.153 expected points added margin, which means not only do they score less points than expected, but even their expected points to be scored or expected points they allow their opponents to be scored are still not in their favor. This is a team that doesn't have a ton of close losses. It's a lot of blowout losses. Michigan State, meanwhile, is basically dead even in EPA margin with a 0.03 EPA margin, and they have a negative 0.186 points per play margin, which means on a play-per-play basis, their opponents outscore them, but not nearly as much as Purdue's opponents outscore Purdue. Purdue's faced the 7th toughest strength of schedule. Michigan State's faced the 12th. That's basically the same thing. Purdue is well outside the top 100 in game control there. It says 66. That's Michigan State in game control. Purdue's outside the top 100, though, in that category, and they're 126th in efficiency. Meanwhile, Michigan State's 72nd in efficiency. So, to reiterate, for the nth time, Michigan State's not a good team, but Purdue is absolutely horrible. And if Purdue is going to pull off the upset here, what they have to do is they have to run the ball. It's as simple as that. Because Michigan State has enough explosivity and enough talent on offense to where they will score on this Purdue defense. There's no doubt about that. They will score. They will score on this Purdue defense. And Michigan State's defense is enough of a liability, especially at pass rush, especially on the defensive line, and also at secondary, but we knew that. Their liability up front is what's been surprising. They haven't had a sack in, 5 or 6 games, which is just insanely poor. That's the matchup here, is can Purdue's tight end, Max Clare, can their offensive line, including Gus Hartwig, can they block for Devin Mockabee? And can they block for these Purdue running backs? Maybe if Ryan Brown plays, or if they want to run Hudson Card, can they block up front? Can they get to the second level? Michigan State, defensively, this season has allowed 27.1 points per game, 76th. They allow 0.424 points per play. They've kind of cratered the longer the year has gone on. Slowly but surely cratering. They're actually top 25 in opponent first quarter points per game, only allowing 3. They start off strong, but as the game goes on, I mean, look at third quarter points per game for Michigan State. They allow 8.8. Purdue only allows 8.1. The fact that Purdue is ahead of Michigan State in a category with how bad this Purdue team is just gross. And Michigan State in stopping the run, they only allow 6.8 rushing first downs per game, which is 24th. 4.1 yards per carry, 52nd, which is impressive because they played Oregon. They played Ohio State before the Josh Simmons injury, which really handicapped their rushing attack, or at least their capability of being explosive on the ground. They've played Michigan. They played Indiana. I mean, they've played a lot of good teams. I mean, Boston College, not a good team, but earlier in the year especially, they were good at running the football. So they faced a lot of good rushing offenses, and their rushing defense is respectable. Only allow 142.8 rushing yards per game, which again, 56th. But they've played a lot of good running backs, rushing offenses. The problem for MSU is their sack percentage is lower than Purdue's. It's a 5.15 sack percentage, 90th. Purdue is a 6.1 sack percentage, which is 64th. Michigan State doesn't get a ton of TFLs. And their secondary is weak enough to where you can kind of open up the ground game or use the ground game to open up the pass. You can move this MSU defense. They are malleable. They are not an immovable object. Dare I say it, maybe they're not even a solid object. But Purdue, when you look at their offense, they only average 4.3 yards per carry, 73rd. They're a very inconsistent rushing offense. At moments, they have burst. We saw this against Ohio State, against Oregon, against Penn State. They ran for over 200 yards on Oregon. And they had moments against Penn State and Ohio State where they were strong at running the ball. But they're not consistent. They can never put anything together. And consequently, they only have 130.3 rushing yards per game. And because their defense is so bad, they don't get a ton of plays because their offense basically has to be perfect for them to stay in a game. That's what the Illinois game represented. I mean, you score 49 points in the Big Ten, you typically win. But because Purdue's defense was that atrocious, Illinois scored 50 points and won by a point in overtime. That's the matchup here, is for Purdue. Can Devin Mockabee, can Reggie Love III, can Max Clare, can their offensive line, which is led by center Gus Hartwig, and Gus Hartwig entered this year, in my book, as being one of the better centers in the Big Ten, and can other players on this offensive line, can they step up like Marcus Mbow, Corey Stewart, and can they face off against a Michigan State defense that is players like Ken Talley, Jordan Turner, Cal Halliday, Chris Bogle, Darius Snow, Anthony Jones, Jalen Thompson, Quindarius Dunnigan, Maverick Hansen, Alex Van Sumeren? Can they step up against especially Michigan State's defensive front, but also pay attention to Michigan State's safeties too in this game? Players like Malik Spencer, Nakai Martinez, Ed Woods, Angelo Gross, who are pretty high in the team in total tackles. How does that matchup work? If Michigan State can force Purdue into inconsistency on offense, especially through the ground, then Michigan State will win and probably cover the spread. If Purdue wants to make this game competitive and pull out with a win, have an upset here, win their second game of the season and first game in Big Ten Conference play, and also spoil Michigan State's goals of going bowling, because Michigan State would earn their seventh loss. They have to win out if they want to go bowling. They got to run the football, and they got to do it consistently. Looking at these offenses here, I would take Purdue at guard and tackle. Purdue actually grades out with a better offensive line than what Michigan State has, which is pretty damning. But that's really about it here. And for the two positions which are a push, running back and center, I would take Michigan State. If you forced the issue, I would take Michigan State at center, Tanner Miller over Gus Hartwig, and I would take K'Ron Lynch-Adams and Nate Carter over Devin Mockabee and Reggie Love III if you forced me to as well. Though I really like Mockabee. There's a good chance that Mockabee is the best individual running back in this game. Michigan State, it's pretty easy at quarterback, wide receiver, not as easy at tight end, but at QB wide receiver, it's so easy to pick Michigan State there. Aiden Childs has had a turnover problem. 10 touchdowns, 11 picks, 130.8 passer rating, completes 61% of his throws, has 2,106 yards, 57th in QBR, but he at least averages 7.8 yards per attempt, and Michigan State at least averages 12.5 yards per reception, which is actually up there with Oregon. Of course, that doesn't mean they have the same passing offense, but Oregon uses a lot of checkdowns, and Michigan State has a player in Nick Marsh who's still averaging 16.5 yards per reception, and Isaiah Johnson's averaging 17.5. They have some home run hitters in that wide receiver room. Just shows how good of a job Courtney Hawkins does in that wide receiver room. Purdue's leading receiver is Max Clare. They're averaging 11.8 yards per reception, and Hudson Card's only averaging 6.7 yards per pass attempt. He's completing 59.6% of his throws, 8 touchdowns, 5 picks, 124.8 passer rating. His QBR is 96th with a 45.3, and he has 1,264 passing yards. Devin Mockabee and Reggie Love III combined have just over 1,000 yards, 1,022 yards to be exact, averaging around 5 yards per carry with 5 rushing touchdowns. You look at Michigan State, their leading running backs, K'Ron Lynch-Adams and Nate Carter, they are just over 900 yards, averaging around 4.5, 4.6 yards per carry, 5 rushing touchdowns on just over 200 carries. Michigan State's rushing offense is not good, and a lot of that's because of the offensive line and the fact that their running backs are good, but they're not world breakers. But the main difference in these offenses is the fact that Nick Marsh has 611 receiving yards, Monterey Foster Jr., Jack Velling, Isaiah Johnson, Jaron Glover, and Nate Carter also have at least 100 receiving yards or more, with Foster, Velling, and Johnson having at least 250 or more. And Johnson, Glover, and Foster each have 2 receiving touchdowns. Nick Marsh has 3. Purdue, on the year, their leading receiver is Max Clare, the tight end, with 566 receiving yards and 3 receiving touchdowns. They kind of have a Michigan-level passing offense where Jamal Edgerine, Jaron Tibbs occasionally have moments at wide receiver, but it's really the tight end special in the passing game, and that's just not a good option for success there. So I would give Michigan State the offense overall. I would give them wide receiver, quarterback, and tight end. Purdue would get guard and tackle, and running back and center would be push, but if I had to lean one way, it would be the Spartans' way. And on defense, I don't think this has to be explained a whole lot, so I'm not going to spend a ton of time on it. Michigan State is the better defense in every category. You could say that Purdue's better in pass rush, and they probably are because Michigan State's one of the worst at pass rush. But I will say that Michigan State's definitely better in run defense. So if the defensive ends for Purdue are better at getting to the quarterback, same with their linebackers. I know that, for example, Kydron Jenkins leads the team in sacks, their linebacker, with 5.5. Michigan State's at least can stop the run. They can at least tackle. Purdue can't tackle, and they've kind of quit, particularly on defense. The only players I'd be scared about with Purdue are Kydron Jenkins at linebacker, Will Helt at defensive end, Dylan Thieneman at DB, and I would say Cole Bereverd and Moa Monday on the interior. That's really, really it. I mean, they run a ton of man coverage, Purdue does, and they get torched over and over again. That's not a good sign when you're going up against Michigan State receivers who are very talented. Purdue only has 18 sacks, 23 passes defended, 4 interceptions, and 2 forced fumbles. Michigan State has 15 sacks, 13 passes defended, 8 interceptions, and 3 forced fumbles. Neither of these defenses are that good, but Michigan State's better coached, and they're way better analytically, even with their struggles. For Michigan State, I would watch out for Jordan Turner and Chris Bogle, linebacker and defensive lineman respectively, who each have 3 sacks. Jordan Turner also has a pick, and he has 57 total tackles, where he leads the team in that category. Pay attention to DBs Malik Spencer, Nakai Martinez, Ed Woods, Charles Brantley. Brantley leads the team with 7 passes defended, and he also has 3 interceptions as well. And then pay attention to some players on the defensive line outside of Chris Bogle, like Jalen Thompson. You also got Jordan Hall at linebacker, Daquan Dawson, Quindinius Dunnigan are other players to pay attention to on the defensive line, and Maverick Hansen at defensive tackle. This is a defense that has some talent. Not a whole lot, and they'll need to use the portal heavily again, but they're much better than what Purdue has. Purdue basically has nothing on the defensive side of the football that I care about. Again, except for Kydron Jenkins, Will Helt, and Thieneman was really good last year, but this year, how good can you be when the rest of your defense is just bleh? And Thieneman himself has not been playing as well as he did in 2023. I would give Michigan State the trenches just slightly. I think their defensive line is much further ahead of Purdue's D-line than Purdue's O-line is ahead of Michigan State's offensive line. And I'd also give Michigan State the special teams edge. Michigan State is a better kicker. They have an excellent punter. And for my money, I think they probably have better potential in the return game. These special teams are surprisingly, relative to how poor the rest of their roster has been, these special teams are pretty all right, pretty good, in fact, nationally, I would say. And I would give Michigan State the edge on special teams. For coaching, you guys know how I feel. Even with how the season has gone, I think Michigan State still is one of the better staffs in the country. I am starting to get a little bit lower on the staff as the year goes on, but it's year one. Mel Tucker left the program in a worse shape than D'Antonio did, and D'Antonio burned it down. Mel Tucker left this program in a similar state to how Tom Allen left Indiana, if that can provide you any context. He may have actually left it in a worse position roster-wise. May have. Because at least Indiana has some pieces on the O-line this year that are pretty good, that were recruited and developed there last year. Same thing with some players on defense. And Brennan Sorsby's balling out at Cincinnati, and he was an Indiana recruited and developed QB. Michigan State doesn't have anyone outside of they don't have anyone outside of Brantley who has been like developed here last year, like Brantley and Carter, who are key contributors. And maybe I'm forgetting another name, but seriously, I mean, that staff left Michigan State in a horrible place. I have a lot of faith in Smith still, and I think their offensive staff is one of the nation's best. Defensively, they may need some change, or maybe the players are just that bad. And I still think Michigan State's pretty solidly conditioned. Again, you just got to recruit, got to develop. I think that's the most important thing for MSU, is bringing in young transfers and especially recruiting out of high school well to build a foundation. And right now they're not doing well in high school recruiting, but maybe that'll change. Who knows? I'm not exactly a recruiting expert, but all of this leads me to pick Michigan State here. I think they're going to cover that 13.5 point spread fairly easily. My model has Michigan State winning this game by 4 touchdowns nearly. I'm not going to go quite that extreme because my model, I think, is a bit high on MSU, and I've thought that way for a few weeks now. But I think they'll win, and I think they'll win handily. I'm thinking 34-13. I think that Purdue's offense is absolutely terrible, but I think they'll score enough because I think they'll be able to run the ball on Michigan State a bit. And I think with Michigan State's secondary, they'll probably be able to get like 1 or 2 deep balls that'll put them in plus territory, put them in field goal range, or even in position to score a touchdown. But Purdue's defense is so awful that I think a Michigan State offense that cannot score in the red zone to save their life. Like, look at this. This right here is mind-boggling. Michigan State only scores 1.6 offensive touchdowns per game. They're 128th. Purdue's 130th. And their red zone scoring percentage is tied with Purdue's, both 72.73%. And both are equal in red zone scoring attempts per game. I mean, this offense for MSU is bad. It is. But I think they'll have success against this Purdue defense. I think they'll find their way against one of the worst defenses in all of college football and the worst defense they faced all year outside of Prairie View A&M. So I think Michigan State wins 34-13, and they cover the 13.5 point spread. Thank you all so much for watching. Remember to like, subscribe, hit the notification bell, and comment your thoughts down below. Thanks to Crash2488, Brasco Rascal, and Connor OH for being Heisman members. Thanks to Chris Lane, Ismar, and Tyler Nye for being All-American members. Thanks to John Lynn, Roaming Gnome, Matthew Sale, Austin Christmas, Joshua Jorgensen, Will Loftus for being all-conference members. Have a great day, everyone. Make sure to check out the Patreon page, merchandise store, and Discord server via the link in the description or down below in the pinned comment. I will see you all very soon. Go Boilermakers and go Spartans.